I'm on a mission to find the greatest game ever made. Welcome back to the series where I play retro gems, modern classics, and everything in between. And today we are talking about one of those modern classics. I've seen people call this the best game on the PS4. I've seen people say it has the best ending in all of gaming, which is a pretty big claim. So finally, I got to sit down and play it. And of course, we're talking about Ghost of Tsushima. Now, before we get into it, this video will have spoilers. I will be talking about the ending of multiple quest lines. I'll be talking about the ending of the main story. So if you haven't played it yet, maybe save this for watch later. Come back when you've finished it and let me know what you think. Alright, is Ghost of Tsushima the greatest game ever made? When I made my Red Dead 2 video for this series, I talked about how it was probably the most visually appealing game I've ever played. Both from a pure graphical standpoint, like how good it looked visually, and also just the art direction, the aesthetics of everything, how it made you feel walking through one of those old Wild West towns, right? But after playing Ghost of Tsushima, I might have to rethink that claim. I mean, this game is just as beautiful as that, and it kind of blew me away, honestly. I played it on PC, my settings were cranked pretty high, but it looks ridiculous. I mean, the lighting in particular is some of the best I've ever seen in a game, full stop. And there's this constant contrast between like these beautiful nature scenes and the absolute terror of what the Mongols are inflicting on Tsushima. And both those things contrast so well, and it gives it such an impactful visual identity that not a lot of games can achieve. Places like Omugi Cove and the Omi Monastery were absolute standouts. I mean, those offered such a visual quality that even 6 years later, you struggle to find games that look this good and this artistically important, if you will. I'm not sure if that's a word, but yeah, you have to remember that this game came out in 2020. It's not exactly a new game, and it still looks a lot better than pretty much anything that comes out nowadays, which is incredible. But what I think really pushes this game over the edge in terms of visuals is the lack of a HUD. And I know it's been talked about to death, but there is no minimap. There's no quest markers. There's no white line on the road telling you where to go. Instead of all that, you have the guiding wind. And again, it's been talked about a lot, but we have to mention it because it's probably the best single design choice in this game, and maybe in any game. Honestly, I'm very high on this whole no HUD kind of vibe they have going on. At any point in the game, you can summon a gust of wind, and it will lead you to wherever you have your quest marker set on, right? So instead of a floating quest marker in the sky, you have the guiding wind that just kind of naturally leads you there. But, and I only realized this about 10 hours into the game, you don't even have to summon the wind. You can just watch the trees like flow in the direction and follow that direction to where you're trying to go. It's it sounds small, it sounds not very important, but honestly, it added so much immersion to the game. And if you've heard me talk about video games before, you'll know that immersion is probably the biggest factor in whether I continue a game, whether I finish a game, whether I enjoy a game. Over the gameplay, over the story, it's how immersed I am in the world and how much I enjoy just experiencing it. And Ghost of Tsushima absolutely nailed that part of it. Aside from the wind, though, you also have the foxes that you can follow to a shrine that you can use to upgrade your charm slots, or the golden birds that will just be flying around in the sky, and if you follow them, they lead you somewhere cool. I don't know what they exactly lead you to. I think it's just anything in the area. Often it was like a haiku spot or someone that I can talk to for a quest. Either way, though, that design choice, that one very small choice, it added so much to the game. And honestly, if every game could implement something similar, I think gaming would be in a better spot. And that's huge praise for how visually interesting this game was. Now onto the technical stuff, and I'll keep this brief because it's kind of boring, but overall the game ran pretty well on PC. No crashes at all, and no major bugs. I did run into quite a few frame rate drops, but that was due to this one UI bug that was kind of annoying, but honestly it wasn't a big deal. Whenever I start a new game, like most people, I'll max out my graphic settings and then kind of inch it back until it runs smoothly. But for some reason, my custom graphics settings were set as the default, and I couldn't change it. So every time I would go into the game, I'd have to manually change it back to what would run smoothly. and then go from there. But often, obviously, I would forget to do that, and I'd encounter a lot of frame rate drops until I realized, and then I would go back and change it. Not a huge deal, definitely kind of annoying, but overall the game was pretty polished. It ran really well on PC, I would say. Alright, let's talk about the gameplay, which is probably my favorite part of Ghost of Tsushima. The combat surprised me with how deep it was. And look, it's not a CRPG, it's not that deep. But for an open world action game that's meant to be tailored to a large audience of people, it was surprisingly deep. It had a lot going on. We'll start with the stances. You have different stances for different enemy types, right? You have one that's good against people with spears, one that's good for swords, shields, and the big brute guys. And once you get used to it, taking on large groups of enemies feels really satisfying. You're breaking guards, switching between stances, depending on which enemy's attacking you. It's really fun. It was done really well, and I think it added a lot to the combat. You've also got a lot of skill trees. There is a lot of skill trees here. You have your skill trees for your deflection and evasiveness. You have your skill trees for exploration. You have skill trees for your ghost weapons, and ghost weapons are something that we definitely need to talk about. I mean, they probably elevated the combat just on their own, like quite a few points. Technically, the combat in Ghost of Tsushima is pretty simple, right? You have your dodge, parry, light attack, heavy attack. But the animations and the pacing of each fight made it feel way better than most games that use this same kind of system. The duels are another highlight. They're usually story-based. I think they're all story-based, and they're one-on-one fights where you have no ghost weapons, you can't use your kunai, you can't use your smoke grenades. But you have to learn their moveset, and pretty much it's a boss fight, right? Everyone knows what a boss fight is, but it kind of took you out of the ghost way of fighting, where you're fighting large groups of enemies, you're sneaking around, you're poisoning people, and it put you into like a samurai kind of one-on-one fight, and it was a real contrast from the rest of the gameplay and the rest of the combat, and I really enjoyed it when I got to do these. It didn't feel like sometimes in games a boss fight just feels like you're fighting one of the enemies from the world just in a boss fight. They have a bigger health bar, but here it felt like a true like cut between what was a duel and what wasn't a duel. And I don't know, maybe I'm not explaining it right, but they did feel really cool. They did look really cool, especially, I mean, all of the arenas, if you'll call them that you're doing these duels in, are visually beautiful. I mean, they sound great, they look great, and the duels were a major highlight for me in the gameplay. Now, here's something that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did, and that's the stealth. I've talked about before that I don't really like stealth. I usually find it more frustrating than fun in a lot of cases. But in Ghost of Tsushima, I actually really enjoyed it, and that was down to the ghost weapons that I kind of hinted at before. These give you a lot of options to take on your stealth encounters, and if you watched my Far Cry 3 review from this series, you'll remember that I didn't like the stealth in that game because I didn't feel like there was enough options. In Ghost of Tsushima, there is a lot of options. You have your smoke grenades, your kunai, your sticky bombs, all those ghost weapons, but then you also have your bow and arrow and your poison dart thing. And these really made the stealth fun. I mean, the ghost weapons were their own thing, but the bow and arrow shooting felt really, really responsive, and the hit markers especially, it's a small detail, but I love the hit markers in this game. When you actually land a headshot and it's that like red crosshair, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful hit marker. And the poison darts, you have the hallucinating one where you shoot it at an enemy and they attack everyone around them. Always like that kind of thing in a game. And then just the normal poison dart where they throw up blood and they die. So all of these options together made the stealth feel really cool. But the other thing that made the stealth feel really fun was the fluidity between combat and stealth. In a lot of games, you do the normal thing. You sneak into a base, you get caught, you initiate combat. But in Ghost of Tsushima, it feels like it wants you to go from stealth to combat, back to stealth, back to combat in a fluid way. And by doing that, by encouraging the player to not just do stealth or just do combat, it makes the stealth both more fun and also a lot easier for someone who doesn't really like stealth. Because if you get caught, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to signal the entire base and make them all attack you at once. You're just going to have, whatever it is, 4 or 5 enemies engage you, and you can defeat them, and then you go back into stealth and go to the next 4 or 5 enemies. This fluidity between combat and stealth made the stealth a lot more enjoyable, and it made it something that I actually enjoyed doing, and I actually, chose to do rather than just go headfirst into the base whenever I could, right? Another thing I didn't expect to enjoy was the outposts. Again, in my Far Cry 3 video, I talked about how outpost clearing is one of my least favorite activities in an open world game. But in Ghost of Tsushima, I actively engaged with the outpost way more than I thought I would. And this was in a large part due to how good the combat was. I think that speaks very highly of how good the combat was, but it was also because the mission structure, right? Each act revolves around taking a major Mongol stronghold. And at the start of each act, you get a list of things that you need to do to be able to initiate the final battle of the act, which is usually storming a castle. And because of that, it kind of made it feel like everything that you're doing actually matters, right? It doesn't feel like random side content, even if it is. It feels like you're slowly, tightening the noose around the Mongol's neck by taking out outposts, helping random civilians, and actually doing the things on the checklist that you have to do before initiating the final battle. Now, structurally, Ghost of Tsushima is a pretty traditional open world game. There are outposts to clear, there's fetch quests, there's activities where you get a small cosmetic upgrade, right? The game disguises it really well with like the guiding wind and how good the combat is and how good the game looks, but underneath all of that, it's still definitely a traditional checklisty open world game. But the big difference here is that you don't have to engage with this stuff at all. It's not like other games where you have to climb these towers to reveal the map. You don't have to do anything to level up to be able to progress through the main story. There's none of that fluff that is actually important. It's all just there if you want to do it. And I did do some of it when I stumbled across it. I mean, I really liked the shrines that you had to complete a little platforming challenge. Those were fun. Easy platforming, but it was fun. And the cat sanctuaries on Iki Island. I mean, cats, bonus points obviously for having cats. Easy win, right? The main side quests were definitely a standout. These were the character arcs, and each major character gets their own, and they're usually some of the stronger writing in the game. Ishikawa's and Masako's quest lines were absolutely my favorites. And then there's the Mythic Tales. And these were probably my favorite quests in the entire game, like even with the main story. Like these were exceptional. They start with you hearing a legend or a story from some guy, and then you go out and see if it's real or what's actually happening. The Black Hand Riki one on Iki Island and the Spirit of Yarikawa were two absolute standouts. And at the end of all these mythic tales, you get a really cool upgrade. There's one where you get the ability to light your sword on fire. There's horse armor, which we'll get into. There's a couple other fighting stances. It's all really cool rewards, which made the quest a lot more fun, right? Alright, now it's time to talk about the story. And this might be my hot take of the video. I don't think it's that hot of a take, but I didn't love the story. I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually, but I didn't think it was as good as maybe some people say it is. For the first half of the game especially, I wasn't fully invested in the characters or Jin's internal conflict between his code of honor and the samurai's code of honor. It wasn't bad, it just didn't really grab me the way I thought it would. But then we reached the end of the game, or I guess the second half of the game, and it really, really picked up. The ending is really strong. And I think this is where the hype comes from, because when you finish a game, you're on this crazy high, and whatever just happened is probably what's going to stick with you the most. So I understand why people think of the story so highly, because the ending is so good, right? The ending of Masako's questline in particular was excellent. I mean, it's the basic story of how revenge never fixes anything, but the way it was framed, you spend so long chasing revenge just to find out the person responsible is her sister, and then she has the option to kill her, but she doesn't. She just gives her a sword and lets her do it herself. And then after that, she feels empty, and it's a classic story, but it worked really well, and I really enjoyed that whole quest line, but especially the ending. I also appreciate the historical callbacks in this game. I mean, if you don't know, the invasion of Tsushima from the Mongols is a real event in history, and one of the reasons it failed was because of a massive storm that swept through the area, destroying most of the Mongol fleet. And the callbacks to weather in Ghost of Tsushima are very apparent. I mean, you have your guiding wind, you have the name of some of your stances being weather-based, and I might be reading into it, but I like to think that this was intentional. As someone who likes history, I thought it was pretty cool. Now let's get into the final fight. This is the one that everyone wants to talk about, right? You end up dueling your uncle, Lord Shimura, and at this point the tension had been building for a while. He doesn't like the way that you're defeating the Mongols, He doesn't like the stealth, the poison, all of that. And you don't fully agree with the samurai code of honor. You have your own code of honor, right? And this fight, I definitely saw it coming. Like about halfway through the game, I was like, all right, he's either gonna die or you're gonna fight him and kill him. One of those two things is happening. There's no way around it, right? But that didn't make it any less emotional. It's still very, very heavy. And I think the reason for that is you both know what's going to happen, and you both understand why. I mean, Jin has to justify his ways of dealing with the Mongol invasion, and Shimura has to justify sticking to the code that he preaches so loudly and sticking to it so rigidly. But neither of you really want the outcome that's going to happen, and that's very, very clear. I mean, both of you are kind of crying, and it's emotional, and it doesn't feel like something that either of you want, but it feels like something that's fully necessary. And after you beat Shimura, the game gives you two options. You can either give him the samurai's death that he asks for, or walk away and spare him or let him bleed out. That decision felt like a culmination of everything that the game's been building towards. I mean, the choice is pretty much asking you if everything you've done up until this point, poisoning the Mongols, using stealth, if all of that was purely out of necessity, or was it an open defiance of the samurai code of honor because you fundamentally don't believe in it? I chose to give Shimura the samurai's death, and that was pretty much just me saying, I think that Jin still believes in the samurai code, but first and foremost, he believes in his own code, which is helping people that can't help themselves, right? To me, that felt like the proper ending. It felt like the true ending. But let me know what you guys picked. I mean, I'm very curious to hear your perspective on the ending of the story. That was just mine. By no means do I think that's absolutely like the ending that should have been chosen, but yeah, let me know what you guys think. So yeah, overall, the story ends incredibly strong. I just wish it had a bit of a better first half, It was good, but I think that with a better first half, we could be talking about one of the greatest stories in all of gaming, for sure. Before I wrap this up, coffee break, we should talk about the Iki Island expansion. I didn't even realize this was a DLC at first because it comes bundled with the PC version of the game, and until I looked into it, I thought it was just a really expansive side quest. But this DLC is centered around dealing with a Mongol faction on a separate island from Tsushima. These Mongols are led by someone called the Eagle, and she uses hallucinogenic poison, I guess, to control people's minds, turn them into shamans, and kind of inflict terror upon this island. What I like most about this expansion, and probably the only thing I liked about this expansion, well, that's a bit harsh, but anyways, I like the backstory it gives Jin. I like learning more about his relationship with his father. I like that we got to see the samurai for all their talk of honor. They weren't exactly innocent when it came to dealing with people who they thought of as lesser than them. And this added some interesting nuance to the whole, honor versus necessity theme that we have in the whole game. That said, this expansion did create a bit of confusion for me, because during Masako's questline, she says that Lord Shimura hunted down and killed the person responsible for your father's death. But in this expansion, you ended up working with the person who killed your father, so I might be missing something, but it seems like a pretty major plot hole to me. The psychedelic elements were cool in this expansion. You have the eagle getting in your head, showing you visions and reliving memories. Overall, it was interesting, nice change of pace, but this whole expansion wasn't really my favorite part of the game. I found traversing the whole island to be very tedious and kind of frustrating, and I also found that after playing through the main story, defeating the Khan and everything, the stakes felt quite a bit lower than they could have. There are some cool upgrades, I guess, in this expansion. I mean, the horse armor, obviously, when a game adds that to a DLC, I always find that funny. And then being able to trample enemies with your horse is really cool. If I had paid for this DLC separately, I don't think I would have been super happy. But also, if I had played this DLC like a year after I finished the main game, maybe I would have been happier. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with it. It's not going to contribute to my ranking of the game because it is an expansion, but I just thought I'd talk about it. Alright, I have talked a lot, so let's answer the question. Is Ghost of Tsushima the greatest game ever made? And I'll say this, it is very close. Right now, at the top of the series, I have Red Dead 2, sitting at an 85 out of 100. And honestly, this is like a 1A, 1B situation. And that might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but I'm not going to put the same score on it, don't worry. I think Ghost of Tsushima absolutely deserves to be in the conversation of the greatest game ever made. And if someone told me that this is the greatest game ever made, I would not argue with them. I would say fair enough and move on. On my little notepad here, I have give score. Usually I have the score already determined. Here I don't. And I'm still, even 25 minutes into this recording, don't really know what I'm giving this. I think it either has to be 84 or 86. Is it just better than Red Dead 2 or just worse? And I think it kind of comes down to what you appreciate more, because Red Dead 2 has the better story. I don't think you can argue with that. I think that is the best story I've ever played in a game. But Ghost of Tsushima has the combat. Like, for sure, it has the better combat. I definitely can't argue that. So, do you appreciate story or do you appreciate combat more? For me, I probably appreciate a story more than I appreciate a combat system, so I'm gonna give Ghost of Tsushima an 84 out of 100. Right under Red Dead 2, and it obviously can't get much closer than that. So let me know what you think. Is Ghost of Tsushima your favorite game of all time? If not, what is? I will add it to the list for the series, and as per usual, I've been Janky. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, subscribing, commenting, all those good things. You'll be helping out a small channel, and I really, really appreciate it. But yeah, I've been Janky. I'll catch you in the next one.